This is artist Dennis Pendleton, and this is a video lesson, a more advanced lesson. We're going to be looking at one of my paintings called Serenity. And by advanced lesson, I mean you should have some understanding of colors and values and shapes and edges, and have painted in watercolor for a while. So this is a painting I did on a painting trip to New England in a little town called Harrisville, New Hampshire. And we're going to be studying this painting in regards to colors and values and shapes and edges and rich darks and effective use of white paper, brushwork, color temperature, borders, and finally artistic decisions. And it's a lot to cover, so let's get started. This is a painting of mine called Serenity, and it came from a painting trip that I took to New England. I was in a little town of Harrisville, New Hampshire. I was walking around looking for subjects to paint when I came across this boat floating on a pond near a cemetery. I was overcome with a feeling of peace and serenity, and I knew I wanted to capture that feeling in the painting. It was a sunny day, quiet, peaceful, and I took a lot of pictures, took some notes, color notes, value study, did a little color study, and then I did the painting in my studio back in Denver. I was intent on capturing my first impression, and I'm going to start with what I call artistic decisions. I wanted to convey a feeling of peace and serenity, so I decided to leave out the sky. In the upper part of the painting, there really isn't any sky, and it starts with these reflections from the trees on the opposite bank. It was fall, and so the trees have fall colors on them, and I thought these reflections, rather than including the trees and the sky and the bank and all that, I thought this would just give a better idea of a peaceful scene. And one of the things that I was intent on was leaving this little opening back here in the water where the tree reflections don't go all the way across. And that's kind of just a little escape area that leads down into the boat instead of all of this being enclosed back here. Another artistic decision of mine was what I decided to leave out. And I didn't put anybody in the boat or on the dock over here because I thought that would just take away from the feeling of serenity that I wanted to capture. Another decision I made was to use some complementary colors, the red trim on the boat here and then the green in the water around it. Made a nice complementary combination. I used green and gold in the colors up here in the trees, and I allowed these colors to mix on the paper. That is, I put them down and just let them run together on the paper, and the paper was tilted just a little bit, so gravity helped with that. And I tried for clean, clear colors all throughout the painting. And like down here in the what I would call the foreground or the forewater, it was really important to keep the colors clear and clean because there's a light, delicate pastel colors through there. Up in here and in the boat and in the boat reflection, it was important to keep the colors clean and keep the mixtures clean. And there's some white paper here, but this reflection down here of the boat, having the colors mix on the paper and remain fairly pure. It's a combination of cerulean blue and cadmium red that made that gray color. And a little bit of that drifts up into the boat here. And some of the other colors I used down here were this is cerulean blue and manganese blue. This right here is a combination of cerulean blue and lemon yellow. There's a lot of cerulean blue and a couple layers over here. And then the trees themselves, in the dark greens, I used olive green and ultramarine blue through there and over here. And in the reflections from the autumn trees up here, I used a little bit of red, but mainly burnt sienna and raw sienna and quinacridone and gold and a little bit of olive green. Down here in the dock, I used some gray mixtures, and there is cerulean blue and red again, also a little bit of alizarin crimson and a darker blue to create some of the darks in there. And the gold, the little leaves that are floating in the water down here, it's the same golds that I mixed up here with raw sienna and a little bit of red in there to warm that up even more. Now let's talk about values. There's a value range from white paper to deep dark greens and several values in between. If you look at the boat, this is white paper here, and then it gets darker in the reflection. And what happens in water reflections, the lightest colors, the reflections are a little bit darker, and the darkest dark colors, typically the reflections are a little bit lighter. In this cerulean blue down here and over here, just within that one color, there's actually a value range of 3 or 4 values. There's a little bit of cobalt violet that comes in here, which is another favorite color of mine, a very delicate color that mixes well. And there's a dark value under the dock here, but really the most important value area, for me at least, is right here where I have the darkest dark against the lightest light. And that just commands more attention and creates kind of a focal point in the area right here. So this dark green right here and over here, I still wanted to have plenty of color identity in that. Even though I wanted it to be really dark, the darkest part of the painting, I didn't want it to go to black or mud. So that's one of the reasons I allowed the colors to mix on the paper, so that they would still stay rich and have their color identity. Now let's look at the shapes. Simple shapes add to the feeling of peacefulness and serenity that I wanted in this painting. And if you look at the boat and the boat's reflection in the water, I consider that one shape, not a bunch of little shapes, but actually just one single shape. So I painted the boat and the water reflection at the same time so that they would kind of mold together a little bit, but I consider that one shape. Then over here on the dock, with the light hitting on top of it and the dark down here, that's another shape. And then the green and gold trees that are reflected in the water here, that's another big shape. This little escape area right here where you just see the water without reflections in it is another shape. And then there's a shape coming along here, this real light area. So thinking of shapes like that really helps me organize the painting and come up with a composition that I like. And if I simplify it into shapes like that in my mind, then I'm less apt to put as many details in. Now let's talk about edges. Most of the sharp edges are in the boat right here. So that's going to command more attention. And then as it goes down into the reflection, a lot of the edges get softer. And that makes a nice transition. So like the red trim on the boat up here turns into this kind of wavy, softer color down through here. And if you look at the edges in the lower part of the painting down here, I created soft edges just by putting the colors so close together in value. There's a little bit of cobalt violet and cerulean blue in here, and it's so soft, and the colors are so close in value that really creates soft edges. And over here where this yellow-green comes in against the lighter blue and white paper, it's so close in value that that creates somewhat of soft edges there. And the reflections from these reeds, I softened some of those and left other ones as clear brush strokes. Up in here, there's a lot going on, a lot of little movement in the water and reflections. And I used a lot of hard and soft edges in that area. Up here in the trees, this is all soft edges up through here and here where the colors mixed. Then it turns into harder edges down here where it comes out of the reflections into the blue part of the water. Now let's talk about the brushwork in this painting. There are visible brush strokes all through this lighter area of the water and back here in the darker reflection of the trees. You can, if you look closely, you can even see what size brush I use because the brush strokes are that obvious. And I used a number 12 sable brush on that. And I think using brush strokes effectively like this creates, like right through here and here, creates a nice rhythm to the painting, and particularly in the water reflections. So I was very conscientious about keeping the brush strokes visible in there. And when you're painting an overlaying wash, like this darker color right here over the top of the lighter blue, this blue violet that comes across, use a delicate brush stroke and really be careful about the amount of water you use because it will mix with the paint that's already on there. Even though the paint is dry, when you add water with the next mixture, it's going to pick some of that up. So just be aware of that when you're painting, and if you're putting an overlaying wash like I did here and some of the areas up through here, use a delicate touch with your brush. That's when a good brush, a good sable brush, is invaluable. Now let's look at the color temperature in this painting. The hottest color, this red, is on what I would consider the focal point of the painting, and it's surrounded by a lot of cool colors, these greens and blues, and the same thing down here. The red reflection is surrounded by green, which is the complement of red, so they're bound to work well together. And up here in the trees, the color temperature is a combination of warm and cool. The warmer reflections from the autumn trees, and then the cooler greens down in here. And in the water itself, this is mainly cool colors down here with blues and so forth. But anytime I cover a big area with one temperature like that, I put accents of the other temperature in it. Like all this cool blue is accented with this little bit of warmer green right here. And you see that in a number of places through the painting. The warm temperatures in the boat up here, there's little bits of cooler colors in it and in the reflection. And then the dock over here, there's pretty neutral colors used in that, but it's somewhat of a combination of warm and cool. And I think color temperature is one of the more important parts of a painting like this. So that's something I really worked hard on. And when I use a lot of warm colors, I put cool accents in it, and when I use a lot of cool colors, I put some warmer accents in it. Now let's look at the rich darks in this painting. If you look at the corners here and here, it's quite a bit darker. And what that does is that just pulls you into the painting a little bit and just sort of keeps you there. But even though these colors are dark, they still have a nice identity to them. You can still see gold and green in them. And the same thing here in the greens. The richest, darkest greens still read as green. They don't get muddy. That comes from not stirring the colors up when I mix them and not stirring them up when I put them on the paper. And in the dock over here, there's actually three main values here: a lighter value, a middle value, and a darker value. And the darker value it is a warm color, but it doesn't get too muddy, and you can still see the components, the browns and the dark blues that I used to mix that. And the darker blues in here are a combination of cerulean blue and mineral violet. But most of this is cerulean blue and cobalt violet, which are lighter colors. And one of the things that I think worked well in this painting was how I used the white paper effectively. Like right here on the boat, right through here is pure white paper, and up here and down through here there's some white paper without any paint on it. Very little bits of light blue washes through some of it. Up here on the dock there's very little paint where the sunlight's hitting the top of the dock. And what happens in watercolor is the light, either sunlight or artificial light, goes through the paint, hits the white paper and bounces back out. And that's what gives watercolor that beautiful luminous quality. Now if the paint is more opaque, you don't get that effect. That's why I really like using transparent watercolors. And areas where it gets deeper and darker like this, less of the light is going to bounce back out again. But it's a nice combination of the white paper down in here and here surrounded by richer darks. One of the things that I think is important for anybody painting is to find subjects that you really like to paint. For me, one of my favorite subjects is water reflections, and that's one of the reasons that this subject appealed to me. I was able to do all this work down through here, which I really enjoy. And it's one of the reasons I like going to places like Venice and painting on the canals and so forth, because I really like working with water reflections. But figure out subjects that you really like and return to them over and over again and find different ways to paint them. So this is Dennis Pendleton saying, until next time, keep on painting.